Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.
Today, we're tackling a really fascinating set of documents you've shared.
Yeah, centered around Pfizer.
Exactly. The pharmaceutical giant. We've got info from their own website, a pretty sharp-edged inquiry from the House Judiciary Committee.
And another probe, this one from the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. A lot to unpack.
Right. So our mission today is to pull out the most significant insights, especially around the COVID-19 vaccine, its development, distribution, and all the questions that came after.
That's the plan. We've got Pfizer's story and then these two layers of congressional scrutiny.
And this matters to you, the listener, because it really gives you a look inside the high-stakes world of global health during a massive crisis.
Definitely. Understanding these documents gives you context on the huge effort, the challenges, the oversight needed.
When you're trying to bring a totally new vaccine to, well, basically the entire world.
And it highlights accountability, which is always crucial with public health.
Okay, let's start unpacking this. First up, the man leading Pfizer, Dr. Albert Bourla. Their website gives us quite a bit on him.
It does. He's chairman and CEO. And he's been at Pfizer a long time, over 3 decades.
Wow, 30 years.
Yeah, various senior roles, lived and worked all over the globe, 5 continents apparently. That kind of global experience must shape your perspective.
You'd think so,
Yeah.
especially in healthcare. And it probably played into how they responded during the pandemic, that deep company knowledge.
Very likely. And since he became CEO in January 2019, it seems like his big push was to make Pfizer more science-driven, innovative.
Yeah, getting rid of non-core businesses, boosting R&D, research and development, that is, and digital stuff, too.
Right. A pretty clear strategic shift, putting a big bet on new science.
Which, you could argue, positioned them for the immense scientific challenge that was coming.
It does seem that way. And under him, they rolled out this purpose blueprint.
Ah, yes, the 4 values: courage, excellence, equity, and joy.
It's interesting seeing those laid out so explicitly by a huge corporation.
It is. And we might circle back to how those stated values stack up against, the scrutiny they face later.
Good point. Because when you look at the COVID response, you see those principles sort of put to the test.
Dr. Bourla emphasizes their decision to not take public funding for the research.
Right, instead investing over $2 billion of their own money at risk.
The stated goal was speed delivering a safe, effective vaccine in, 8 months? Something that usually takes years.
But, they stressed, without cutting corners on quality. That upfront financial risk probably did speed things up.
And that focus on speed and innovation carried over, didn't it?
It did. They point to developing the first FDA-authorized oral antiviral for COVID-19 using similar light speed principles.
FDA being the Food and Drug Administration, of course.
Yeah. And they say they applied that thinking elsewhere, too. A faster operational tempo for the company.
He even wrote a book about it all. Moonshot.
Moonshot. Inside Pfizer's 9-month race to make the impossible possible. Yeah, it got some recognition. It definitely frames their pandemic effort as a major success story under his lead.
We also see a clear focus on ESG principles during his time.
Environmental, social, and governance.
Right.
They issued a sustainability bond, their first ESG report. It shows that growing corporate focus.
And his background isn't business, it's science.
Doctor of veterinary medicine and a PhD in biotechnology of reproduction, plus honorary degrees.
That scientific grounding likely shapes his leadership in such a research-heavy field.
You'd imagine so. And he received a lot of awards and recognition, especially in 2020, 2021, 2022, for his pandemic leadership.
He's also involved in various big organizations, FHRMA,
The Pharmaceutical Trade Group,
the Council on Foreign Relations, Partnership for New York City, so engaged beyond just pharma.
and active on social media too, X and LinkedIn, if you want his direct perspective.
Okay, so that sets the stage for the leadership. Now let's pivot to the scrutiny from Congress, starting with the House Judiciary Committee.
Right. This letter is dated May 15th, 2025, and it gets into some really serious allegations.
The core issue is, what? Delaying vaccine results.
Essentially, yeah. Allegations that Pfizer might have deliberately delayed reporting positive clinical trial results.
To influence the 2020 presidential election? That's huge.
It is. It raises major questions about, the integrity of the whole process and potential political interference.
And where did these allegations come from?
The letter names a source. Dr. Philip Dormitzer, a former senior executive at Pfizer.
A former insider.
Exactly. And reportedly, he told his next employer, GSK, about this in late 2024.
After President Trump's election.
Right. And the reported reason he came forward is interesting. He apparently went to GSK HR worried about potential investigations by the incoming Trump administration.
Investigations into his own role in the vaccine development.
That's what's reported. He even asked about relocating to Canada, apparently. It suggests he was pretty worried.
And he supposedly made a comment.
To the GSK HR person, yeah. Something like, let's just say it wasn't a coincidence, the timing of the vaccine.
Wow. That's a pretty loaded statement. Implying it was deliberate.
It definitely sounds that way. And it gets more specific. GSK apparently told the committee that Dormitzer alleged the top 3 people in Pfizer R&D.
The very top R&D leadership.
Yes. Were involved in a decision in late 2020 to deliberately slow down clinical testing.
Slow down the testing itself.
So that the results wouldn't be complete before the election results came out.
Okay, but GSK made a distinction there, right?
They did. They stressed that Dormitzer apparently said this wasn't about delaying the release of finished results.
So not sitting on data they already had.
But about slowing down the process of getting that data, making sure it wasn't ready before the election.
That's a critical difference, potentially, in terms of intent.
It is. But the committee seems concerned this still points to a possible conspiracy, withholding public health info for political reasons.
Which is why they're asking for so many documents.
A huge range. All communications among Pfizer employees about reporting vaccine trial data from March 2020 onwards.
And communications between Pfizer and government agencies.
Yep. FDA, CDC, HHS. Same topic, same time frame. They're casting a very wide net.
Internal comms, external comms with regulators.
And they specifically want everything sent or received by Dr. Dormitzer himself about this between March 2020 and November 2021.
That's a lot of material.
Yeah.
The scope really shows how seriously they're taking it.
Absolutely. And the deadline they gave Pfizer was May 29, 2025.
And the committee notes this falls under their oversight of civil liberties and administrative practices.
Okay.
Now let's look at the other inquiry from the Senate side.
Right. The Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, their letter is dated April 2, 2025.
And their focus is a bit different.
Slightly different angle, yeah, but just as important. They're doing a broader review of the whole COVID-19 vaccine development and rollout.
Including Pfizer-BioNTech's vaccine.
Yes. And also looking specifically at reported adverse events and injuries. So more focused on the safety monitoring and outcomes.
This is framed within the context of Operation Warp Speed, too.
It is. They mention the government's big investment in manufacturers, including that $1.95 billion advance purchase agreement Pfizer had.
So even though Pfizer funded its own R&D, they were still a major partner receiving government money for the doses themselves.
Exactly. The letter traces the timeline, the emergency use authorization, the EUA, in December 2020.
And then full FDA approval as Comirnaty in August 2021.
And they specifically call out reports of adverse events like myocarditis and pericarditis, which shows that ongoing safety scrutiny.
The subcommittee is doing this under Senate Resolution 94. And the tone of the letter sounds pretty firm.
It does. The chairman explicitly warns Pfizer not to try and hide records, even mentioning past issues they had with HHS on transparency.
So they mean business. What kind of information are they asking for?
It's incredibly broad. Records on Comirnaty's development, administration from January 1, 2020, basically up to the present.
What does that include?
Names of Pfizer people involved, lists of all outside entities they worked with on development and testing.
Like research partners, labs?
Presumably, yes. Including work on variant surveillance, and they want all communications about development.
Internal Pfizer comms.
Yes, internal comms with contractors and especially comms with federal agencies, HHS, CDC, FDA, NIH.
National Institutes of Health.
Even the Department of Defense, covering everything from trials, approval, adverse events.
And not just for Pfizer's vaccine.
No, they specifically asked for comms regarding adverse events related to J&J and Moderna vaccines, too. Seems like they want a comparative view.
Interesting. They're looking across the board at safety signals.
And they also want communications with tech platforms.
Like Google and Facebook.
Alphabet, Google, YouTube, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, X, Twitter, specifically about adverse events and Comirnaty.
So they're looking at how safety info or maybe misinformation was handled online, too.
It appears so. They're interested in the broader information ecosystem around the vaccine's safety.
And this wasn't the first time the subcommittee asked for information, right?
Correct. The April 2025 letter actually demands a complete response to an earlier letter they sent way back on December 29th, 2021.
Almost 3.5 years earlier. What was that about?
That 2021 letter raised some pretty specific concerns based on analysis of VAR's data.
VARs being the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, the public reporting database.
Right. Independent researchers had apparently flagged that there seemed to be a lot more variation in reported adverse events between different lots of the COVID vaccines.
Different manufacturing batches.
Exactly. Compared to what you typically see with, say, flu vaccine lots over many years.
Higher variability between batches. Why is that a concern?
It raises questions about manufacturing consistency, quality control. Were some lots potentially different, leading to more adverse events?
And the numbers they cited were significant.
Pretty stark, yeah. They gave an example. The flu vaccine lot with the most reports over 30 years had 137 events. One Moderna COVID lot had over 5,000 in less than a year.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
And they noted a high percentage of serious adverse events seemed linked to a small percentage of COVID vaccine lots overall. That kind of clustering is unusual.
Did they mention specific issues beyond the VA lease data?
The 2021 letter also brought up instances of potentially contaminated doses or lots. Moderna had issues in California and Japan. J&J had production problems.
So those real-world examples likely fueled the concern about lot consistency.
Probably. Which led them to ask Pfizer a whole list of detailed questions back in December 2021.
Like what?
Were they aware of this VAERS data showing high event lots? Had they investigated? Why or why not? Had they seen this with other Pfizer products before?
Basically, did you know and what did you do?
Pretty much. They also asked for a complete list of all Pfizer COVID vaccine lots, details on manufacturing sites in-house versus contracted.
Info on any discarded lots, the number of doses per lot, results of FDA audits at their plants, details on quality control checks, statistical sampling, the whole 9 yards.
And specifics on their lot numbering system, really digging into the manufacturing and quality process.
And the original deadline for that was way back in January 2022.
Yes. So the recent April 2025 letter is essentially saying, we asked for this years ago, now give us the answers.
Okay, so the Senate inquiry is really zeroing in on safety, transparency around adverse events, and the nitty-gritty of quality control.
It is a very thorough look at that side of things.
If you put these two inquiries together, the House looking at potential political timing, the Senate looking at safety and quality.
It paints a picture of intense scrutiny from Congress, hitting Pfizer from multiple angles related to the vaccine.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. We've covered quite a bit in this deep dive.
We have. We started with Pfizer's leadership, Dr. Bourla, his long tenure, the push for innovation.
And how that arguably fueled the incredible speed of their COVID vaccine development. His framing of it as a moonshot.
Right. But then we pivoted to these two major congressional inquiries.
The House Judiciary Committee digging into those really serious allegations about potentially delaying trial results to influence the 2020 election.
Which directly challenges the company's image and stated values.
And then the Senate Subcommittee's broad investigation into the vaccine's development, rollout, and especially the tracking and transparency around adverse events and manufacturing quality.
Taken together, these documents really show the immense pressure and complex scrutiny pharmaceutical companies face, especially during a global crisis.
It highlights that interplay between, rapid scientific advancement, corporate decisions, government oversight from bodies like the FDA and CDC.
And the absolute bedrock need for public trust, especially when you're talking about injecting billions of people.
So it leaves us with a question for you, the listener. When you consider everything, the unprecedented speed, the pandemic pressure, these serious allegations, what does this all suggest to you about the challenges, but also the responsibilities of these big drug companies and the regulators overseeing them in times like these?
And maybe what other questions does this deep dive raise for you? What else do you want to explore about this whole incredibly complex situation?
Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.